mà như thế này thường thì phải khoảng chục ký nhỉ.
The rainforest was still heavy with the weight of morning mist when Ethan Callahan and Marcus Varela tightened the straps of their climbing gear. Though they looked like ordinary woodsmen at first glance, weathered shirts, rope coils slung across their backs, and machetes hanging loosely from their belts, they carried within them the hardened instincts of men who had spent half their lives in the wilderness. Their destination that morning was an enormous kapok tree, a titan among trees, rising almost 70 meters above the forest floor, somewhere high within its towering branches. A colony of giant wild bees had built their combs, dark, glistening structures heavy with golden honey. Locals called these bees stone bees for their fierce bite and relentless swarming whenever disturbed. For the villagers living miles away, honey from these bees was more than food. It was medicine, trade, and tradition, but the risk of gathering it was so high that only men like Ethan and Marcus, experienced, fearless, and intimately familiar with the ways of the forest, would dare. "Do you think they've grown larger since last season?" Marcus asked, adjusting the loop of rope that crossed his chest. His voice was steady, but his eyes glimmered with both excitement and calculation. Ethan smirked. "If they haven't, we wasted a journey. The comb should be twice the size by now." The forest around them pulsed with life. Cicadas screamed from invisible perches. Monkeys howled in the distance. And shafts of pale sunlight cut through the fog like silent swords. Yet, above all of this, the kapok tree dominated the scene. Its buttress roots spread wide like the ribs of a colossal beast. And its trunk rose unbroken for what seemed an eternity before bursting into an umbrella of branches. Ethan tightened his gloves and looked up. "We'll have to climb straight from the north side. The bark is rougher there. Easier grip." Marcus nodded, pulling out a small pouch. He dabbed ash onto his skin, a trick to mask sweat and scent, an old method passed down by forest hunters to keep insects from swarming too soon. The climb began. The first steps upward were deceptively simple. From below, the tree looked like stone, but as their hands touched the bark, they felt its softness, layers of moss, thin threads of vines, and the occasional skittering insect. Ethan climbed first, his body moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who trusted his limbs more than ropes. Marcus followed closely behind, careful but equally determined. At 15 meters, the air grew thinner, cooler. At 30 meters, the forest below blurred into a sea of green. The ground was no longer a place, they were entering another world. One where light fractured into golden shards through the canopy and silence deepened into an almost sacred hush. At 50 meters, they paused on a broad branch to rest. Marcus wiped his brow, then pointed upward. "There," he whispered. Suspended beneath a massive fork of the tree, the hive appeared like a cluster of molten bronze frozen in mid-drip. Thousands of bees moved across it in shimmering waves, a living surface that shifted and glistened with restless energy. Ethan exhaled. "That's the largest I've seen in years." "Which means the angriest," Marcus muttered. They both knew what came next required more than climbing skills. The bees were not enemies to be fought head-on, they were guardians. To reach the honey, the men needed strategy, patience, and respect. Marcus reached into his satchel and produced a bundle of dried leaves and resin. With a flick of his lighter, he coaxed a small flame and soon a trail of smoke drifted upward. Smoke was the timeless ally of honey hunters. It calmed the bees, dulled their aggression, and bought precious minutes before chaos erupted. "Ready?" Ethan asked. Marcus smiled grimly. "As ready as I'll ever be." As they moved closer, the hive came alive. A dozen bees broke formation and circled them. Scouts testing the intruders, the men kept still, allowing the smoke to drift higher. Ethan swung himself onto a narrow branch only 2 meters away from the hive. Its size stunned him. The comb stretched nearly 2 meters across, layered with glistening honey that caught the sunlight. The weight of it sagged the branch slightly. Marcus anchored himself a little below, tending the smoking bundle, feeding it slowly with resin. The air thickened with the scent of burning leaves. For a moment, it seemed to work. The swarm loosened, their movements sluggish, almost drowsy. Ethan drew his knife. Its blade flashed once, sharp and precise. He pressed it against the edge of the comb, slicing away a heavy portion that dripped with gold. The sound of tearing wax was almost drowned by the sudden roar of the hive. The bees awoke. A 1,000 wings thundered in unison. The air turned black and alive. Marcus shouted, his voice half lost. Move. Quick. Ethan stuffed the dripping honey into a woven sack tied to his belt. But already bees clung to his arms, his neck, his face, even through the smoke. Their fury burned. One stung his cheek, then another pierced his wrist. His vision blurred with a shock of pain. Down, Marcus yelled. He swung his smoking bundle in wide arms, driving back part of the swarm, but more poured out in relentless waves. The men descended in a rush, sliding ropes, gripping branches, the forest spinning around them. Every few meters, a sting landed, sharp, hot, electric, yet adrenaline pushed them downward, faster and faster, until at last they crashed onto the thick roots of the tree. Panting, covered in welts, the two men staggered back. Above them, the hive still seemed a black storm against the sky. Ethan spat blood from where his lip had swollen. He looked at Marcus, then at the sack bulging with honey. We got it, he said hoarsely. Marcus managed a laugh, though it ended in a cough. Barely. The journey back to the village was slow. Each step through the forest throbbed with pain, every sting reminding them of the risk they had taken. Yet as the weight of the honey pulled on Ethan's belt, they both knew it had been worth it. When they arrived, the villagers gathered quickly. Children stared wide-eyed at the swollen faces of the hunters. Elders reached for the honey with reverence. The golden liquid was more than sweetness, it was medicine, ritual, survival. That evening, as the village feasted, Ethan and Marcus sat by the fire, nursing their wounds with cool leaves. The hive's roar still echoed in their ears, but so too did the sight of the villagers smiling, laughing, alive with gratitude. Marcus leaned back, staring into the flames. One day, Ethan, we won't be fast enough. These bees, they don't forgive. Ethan chuckled softly, though his eyes were distant. Maybe, but until then, the forest still needs men who can climb. Silence fell between them, filled only by the crackle of firewood and the deep breathing of a village at peace. Above, the stars burned like distant embers. And somewhere in the canopy, the bees returned to their endless, tireless labor. The forest had given once more, and the men had taken, at a price. But that was the pact. That had always been the pact.
Dầu lên mà, dầu lo lên mà. Wow, dưới đơn mà rất là khổ luôn chứ. Thế lấy cái à? Vậy có bên nó có mang gì phụ tặng lô có? Một anh gần thành công rồi. Còn anh kia. Hôm nay trời nắng chang chang. Mình đi bắt ong. Kalau iPhone? Toh ha? Ya toh ni ka?
Mắt to thăng lửa nông nguồn à, sừng to hút nó mà nó po po ấy tổ cái này nhá, thì cho để hút tay ngô lại. chỉ có thêm này khó chứ là cái gì luôn. Nó sẽ làm cho có lúc mà để cho nó ổn.
Cho nó có biết chốt tiền cơ.